We're going to start with one of my favorite brain structures, and I say one of them because I do have a couple, because I'm a nerd, and that's what I do. The amygdala is one of my very favorites. The amygdala is a very primitive brain structure. We all have them. Dogs have them, cats have them, even lizards have them. The amygdala, here in red, down deep in the brain, is a primitive structure. It's the brain's burglar alarm. It keeps you alive. Its one job is to keep you alive. It checks everything in your surroundings to figure out if you need to deal with that. And in science, we think of it as being responsible for the 4 F's. Now, a lot of you have probably heard of the fight or flight response. Many of you heard the fight or flight response? Okay, that's this guy. The amygdala does, it kicks off the fight or flight response. But it also deals with feeding. Anything related to food, because food helps you stay alive. So if we run into each other and you give me a great cheesecake, the next time I see you, my amygdala is going to be like, that's good, don't get stressed. That's a good person, they have cheesecake. We need that. Likewise, if you're going to fight, the amygdala is really good at speeding up your heart rate, getting blood out to your muscles, actually shutting off your digestion, or fleeing, same thing with fleeing. It's going to shut your digestion off, blood flow to muscles, shut your reproduction off. Because honestly, if you're running for your life from a tiger, is that the best time to ovulate? Probably not. Let's be honest, probably not. So it's a good call. The amygdala also has a direct projection up to the thinking portion of the brain and can shut off higher cognition under stress. And this is something to think about, again, because if you're running for your life, you don't need to do long division in that moment. But if you're constantly in a situation where you're under chronic stress, what happens with people who are under chronic stress? Digestive issues, reproductive issues, cognitive issues. We weren't built to have this guy firing all the time. This was supposed to be for emergency use only. But in contemporary society, it gets used a little more than that, and it's something, the more you know about it, the more you might be able to do about it. The 4th F is actually really important when we think about keeping ourselves alive. The 4th F is actually reproduction. Flirting. Okay. So you don't want this guy, and believe me, the amygdala is a guy. You don't want this guy. Food, fighting, come on, this is a guy. You don't want him running around unsupervised. So to compensate for this and to make us human, we have a big portion of our brains called the frontal lobe. And this is why you need a PhD, because neuroscience is really hard. Because the frontal lobe is in the front. It's in the front part of the brain. It's the frontal lobe. I'll recap that later so you guys can get it. The frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is really very much like a conductor. And many of you probably have heard the expression executive function, and that it does executive work. I really like to think of it as a board of directors. The frontal lobe does lots and lots and lots of different things. And we could do a whole lecture just on the magic of the frontal lobe. But the frontal lobe is you. It's the last to develop. It's the first to wither. It's the most dynamic. It's the most different portion of our brains among us. It takes the longest to become because it really does help you be you in your environment. That's why it waits to develop. It wants to help you thrive where you are. Now, what it also is really amazing at doing is it produces behavior. Without a frontal lobe, there's no behavior. Some of you may have heard of a frontal lobotomy. If you haven't, don't get one. Even if there's a discount, just don't. Without a frontal lobe, no behavior comes out of a human being. Without the frontal lobe, no behavior comes out. So I like to use an analogy to music and a conductor. The frontal lobe is a little more like the conductor of music. And music in this analogy is human behavior. So if you think of an orchestra, many different sections, many different pieces, and to play beautiful music, that conductor's got to get all the different sections to work at the right pace, at the right volume, at the right time to make beautiful music. And that's what the frontal lobe does. It taps different pieces of brain to get something done, and it gets them all organized, and then it produces the behavior. So in this analogy, imagine if an orchestra had been practicing the Brandenburg concertos, and they had it down, and it's performance night, conductor taps the baton, instruments up, and at the very last minute, the horns think, you know, we're going to play Beyonce. How's that going to sound? Weird. It's going to sound weird. It's going to sound wrong. That's bad behavior. The frontal lobe has a plan. It gets everybody going. Everyone's on point. And then one part of the brain's like, yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm going to do my own thing. That's much more likely to happen if things are not as coordinated, not as practiced, as they will be as you get older. So when you're younger, this happens much more frequently.